welcome to the county seat. I'm your host today, Chad Booth. Well, the new year's underway and the legislature's just around the corner, which means that there's big ocean of bills that has to go through this narrow little channel in 45 days and get out the end. There are probably 1,500 bills filed, and there maybe will be 400 that get passed.
Yeah.
So we're going to discuss what's important to the counties today, and nobody better to pick up that topic than Adam Troop, CEO of the Utah Association of Counties. Thank you, Adam. And Lincoln Schertz, who is the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Utah Association of Counties. So let's kind of prioritize and talk about what is really important for the counties. Most of the late year headlines centered around Operation Rio Grande, which is kind of tied into the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, which kind of was tied into Medicaid expansion. You got this whole big picture that's kind of a mess. Are we going to pick that up in the legislative session again this year?
Well, we certainly are. What we see from Justice Reinvestment, what we see from the Rio Grande project is that all of these issues are connected to each other, really. And the criminal justice system has an impact on people who have substance use disorders or mental health problems, and vice versa. And the reality is that spreads out to many things like housing needs, like recovery needs, and services for people who are in that situation. So the reality is it continues to grow. We have a lot more issues that come up, and I think are seeing this more holistically over time. So it'll be back.
So people will go back in the headlines and they'll go, okay, well in November you just got a big chunk of money.
Sure, absolutely. So one thing that I think you need to do whenever you're looking at governance is look at what the governor's done with his budget. The best way to kind of evaluate administration and see what their priorities are is by looking at their budget. The governor just came out with his $16 billion budget and a huge emphasis on education and a huge emphasis on healthcare and Rio Grande and justice reinvestment, which is really something we find valuable, is that the governor has prioritized some of the major issues for counties, namely justice reinvestment, and recognizing with Medicaid expansion, which was recently adopted by the state and approved by the Center for Medicaid Services. Big priority for counties and something that has been prioritized by the governor as well. So that's great for us.
With Medicaid expansion, it seems like all the focus is just, around Pioneer Park. I mean, no pun intended, but that looks like the focal point of where everybody's talking about the money. Is it going to get out to the other 28 counties?
It definitely will. That is the focus of what's getting a lot of attention in the media, but our weekly discussions, and I think the governor's office has heard it, legislative leadership has heard it also, are those needs that occur in other places outside the state, and they are also pretty significant. There's homeless issues all over the state. There's treatment needs and criminal justice needs all over the state.
When Representative Hutchings got JRI in and through and got buy-in from the counties, and everybody was pretty upbeat about it, but he was counting on Healthy Utah Initiative to fund it, and that didn't come through. And he said, well, I got money to cover it, but it was like, what was it, $4 million?
$4 million to the counties, about $10 million to the Department of Corrections for services there. You've got to remember, when we were talking Healthy Utah, you were talking about expanding health care coverage to about 50,000 Utahns. Under the expansion that was recently passed, we're talking 7,500 Utahns. So it is certainly scaled back from the original concept, but it's a targeted population, which is really the JRI population. It's folks who have substance abuse disorders, mental health disorders, and have been criminally justice involved. So if you talk about that population, clearly we're focusing on that population that was the emphasis behind JRI.
Do you think that we're now talking in the kinds of numbers, if we get some ongoing funding for it, that will actually kind of turn the problem and maybe keep it from cropping up in, say, Juab County or something like that? I'm not meaning to pick on Juab County by any means.
We're not certain. I would say that there is a large influx of money. That's great. We have opportunities that kind of funding provides. The question is, can we all together make the system work? Can we make improvements when we have the funding? And that really is the bigger question. This is not a matter of simply throwing a lot of money at something. It's a matter of trying to find solutions to really complicated problems, trying to find ways to get people into recovery and to being helpful members of society instead of being trapped in their illness. And that really is the bigger challenge.
Well, and the bigger issue there is everyone's trying to lay blame at JRI's feet. And I'm not saying JRI doesn't have an impact. You have to also remember, overlay an opioid epidemic that is ravaging this entire country. This isn't just a JRI problem. This is an opioid epidemic problem that we're trying to deal with. Certainly the $30 million the state put into expansion plus the $70 million we'll draw down from the federal government, $100 million in the system is going to help with behavioral health. That's a lot of money, but it is a overwhelming epidemic that is plaguing every community in the state.
So is there any community in Utah that you think is exempt from the opioid problem?
Certainly not. I mean, at our conference, what was it, 4 weeks ago, every single county commissioner we talked to was talking about how this is plaguing members of their community.
We're going to wrap up this particular topic. We're going to move on to something next in just a minute after we take a break here on the county seat. Stay with us.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're talking about important things for the counties that are going to be discussed during this legislative session. We've covered JRI. Now we want to turn to 25,000 jobs in 25 counties. It kind of was an outgrowth of the State of the Union address of the governor and kind of got some traction. So far, the governor's been in the process of meeting with all the counties to try and figure out what to do. What do we need to do legislatively to really turn economic development into high gear in rural Utah?
Well, I would start with infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. If ever you talk to these counties that are the target of the 25,000 Jobs Initiative, the biggest gaping hole in terms of their economic development package is lack of infrastructure. Anytime a company is looking to locate to the state of Utah, some of the critical things they're looking for is obviously transportation, the ability to get in and out of the state quickly, especially when you're looking at distribution, which has been a huge issue for the state. When you're talking intermodal hub, inland port, coal port, all of these other things that have been major initiatives for the state. So that's one piece. The other piece is recognizing the economy is changing. In the 25 targeted counties, if you look at economic prosperity since the Great Recession, you have about 12 counties that have actually seen declines in their economy over the last 7 years. And those declines are largely related to natural resource extraction. We are not extracting coal like we once were. And so changing the face of what their economy looks like globally is going to be a big issue for Emery County and Carbon County in the Uinta Basin.
County seat's been on the air for 7 years. For 7 years, we have talked about the fact that to get businesses to relocate to rural counties, you do have to have that infrastructure in place, and it's a chicken and egg thing. But there's been, there've been a couple of case studies of places where, a county will, like Juab County, will take a project on that comes from GOED, and they'll go all the whole 9 yards to fill in all the gaps that it takes to make it go, and then they say, well, that's too much, and it gets short-circuited. But it seems to me that would have helped other businesses down the line with what they started. How do you get the mentality of the rural communities and the state on the same page as to getting what they need done? That That would be my question.
Sure, and I think part of it is recognizing that we're moving more towards a service-based economy. The entire economy is changing in terms of how we buy and sell goods. You don't have to go to the brick and mortar store to buy and sell goods. People can remotely work from their home. So access to high-speed fiber or internet is going to be a critical component of allowing people to work from their homes remotely, which is certainly going to be something as we move forward. And then also, like I've said, just looking at ways in which we can invest in the infrastructure that will allow for different types of economic development. One of the big things you're seeing right now, especially is with these data centers that are looking at locating, again, as the economy changes, guess where they want to get their power? They want it from renewables. Those renewables do not have to be co-located with the data center. So you could have a renewable solar farm in Emery County that's supplying the power to the data center that sits in West Jordan City. And so we need to look at how you can collaborate among communities to bring in that economic development that can both help the Wasatch Front, but also be a boon and benefit to rural Utah.
And we have seen legislative changes over the last few years to help with infrastructure in different forms and give opportunities to smaller population counties. But the reality is that the biggest need probably and to move that idea forward is for people to collaboratively get together and say, how are we going to make this work for multiple counties? Not just, hey, there's an idea we want to pursue, but how are we going to make this work between 3 or 4 counties? Or how are we going to make this work for the Wasatch Front by supporting those needs through our rural culture?
Yeah, isn't part of it, though, having realistic expectations? I mean, you know, the state will go, they'll call Paiute County and say, hey, we might have a lead that could put 600 jobs in your county. 600 jobs would bury Paiute County. They'd be thrilled if at 100 jobs. But so is the governor listening to this matching?
Absolutely, and like you said, recognizing what will work in different communities. Airbus and Boeing aren't going to move to Paiute County, and we need to recognize that they shouldn't be putting in on those sorts of projects. But there are things that they can put in on that they do have a viable chance of getting to locate here in the state of Utah. Also looking at our tourism, as a part of the governor's budget, he invested a lot of money into promoting tourism and rural tourism in the state of Utah, recognizing that could be a huge boon for these communities as well.
And I'd add, too, that none of us can avoid noticing that the state is growing tremendously, and there's more business coming in, more infrastructure, more of everything coming into the state. That will spread out over time, but I think that if we don't plan for where we're going, if we don't look to a Juab County, for example, which borders Utah County, and ask, what do we do next? How do we help them to grow to where they want to be and help them get to the place that really is the community that we all want? Jointly, we're not making real progress. All we're doing is spreading out growth more. And so I think we've got more opportunities. We're on a good track, but we need more planning and more collaborative approaches.
So are there any bills that you've heard rumblings of that are going to come up on this issue?
Most of the bills that we're looking at this year are largely focused on just getting a better handle on what the issue is and recognizing half of this state is getting left behind in terms of the economic boom we're experiencing. And I think once we have that recognition, those solutions will follow.
Excellent. We're going to take a break. We'll move on to our next topic. You're watching The County Scene.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo Rivers. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
back to the county seat. We're just doing a coin toss here to see who takes the next topic. The next one we want to talk about is transportation. Takes many forms. Most of the conversation I've heard in the media lately has been about Utah Transit Authority and reconfiguring the board and the governing authority. Do the counties have an opinion on this?
Certainly. So let me back up a little bit. Transportation Planning Task Force was authorized last year. It has been running throughout the summer, talking about a host of issues. The three major issues: funding, governance, largely related to transit, and then the last piece is how do we deal with capacity, how do we deal with the growth that we're experiencing in the state of Utah. As it relates to the governance piece, the proposal on the table is to take the 16-member board down to a 3-member commission that would be a full-time, publicly accountable commission. And the idea is with that accountability would come greater oversight. So that's kind of the expression of the speaker and others who have really tried to push this model. From a county perspective, the one thing we want to make sure, we're the bodies that have imposed the taxes that fund UTA. So long as we have representation on those boards and feel as though that we have adequate oversight for the tax dollars we've authorized, we're going to be comfortable with the proposal. And we've been working with leadership on solutions that would give us great oversight through advisory committees and the like on that commission.
And to say though, if you've got a commission and you're looking for taxation and representation, and you've got what, 8 or 9 counties that are involved in UTA, yeah, and you got 3 members on the commission, how's that one going to feel left out? So
the idea is you'll have the 3-member commission that they all kind of coalesce around those selections and those nominations, but then you'll have a 7-member advisory committee that would have representatives from each county that are really, think of a planning commission. They provide advice to the commission can then take that advice, and the hope is through that advisory committee process we'll have adequate representation. So in fact, while we say it's 16 members to 3, it's really 16 members to 10 if you have a robust advisory committee of 7 members in addition to the 3-member commission.
So how do you get fiduciary responsibility? Do you elect the commission, or is that going to be an appointment?
The commission is an appointment, so we would provide names to the governor. The governor would send those names to the Senate for confirmation. So it would be similar to many other boards and commissions throughout the state.
The benefit, obviously, is you've got a smaller group of people who are directly accountable. It's a lot easier with a larger board to be able to say, well, we couldn't come into agreement, or 9 of us went one direction, the others went the other direction. With 3 people, you do have accountability. You have a clear line of responsibility, too. So the concept does work, but I agree with Lincoln. There's got to be some advisory structure, too.
Well, and the concept is with the 3-member commission, hopefully that gives the public some sense of security that there's some oversight that has been maybe lacking in the past. And with that oversight, maybe additional comfort to imposing the Prop 1 monies to fund transit and other multimodal aspects of our transportation system that we're going to need.
If you'd have asked practically anybody in Utah 15 years ago that mass transit was actually going to take hold in Utah, wouldn't you agree you'd have thought that was crazy?
Sure. I don't think 20 years ago we thought we would have another 1.5 million people living in this valley, which is what we expect by 2040. And with the 2 mountain ranges, we're constrained. We can't build more roads because we're running out of space to build more roads. And so the idea that you have to look multimodally and find ways in which we coordinate our development and coordinate our transportation is going to be critical to accommodate the growth we're expecting.
What are other transportation issues? Are the B and C roads, the county roads and the highways, are they finally settled?
For the B and C roads, which are our city and county roads, things are mostly settled. There is a pretty robust conversation about land use planning and transportation funding. So we do anticipate they're going to be looking at some additional alternatives for transportation funding. The one that's probably the most salient that's being discussed is an alternative to the gas tax, recognizing we have more electric vehicles. We aren't paying gas tax. So how are we going to fund the roads in the future as heavily reliant on gas tax as we are today? So looking at alternatives to that and ways in which we can tax appropriately electric vehicles for their use of the roads is another major issue that they're looking for. So lots of discussions: registration fees, gas taxes, user fees, etc.
I was going to say, is a per mile option actually, you think you'd ever get that passed?
So they want to do a pilot program this year and give the authority to UDOT to actually constitute a VMT, a vehicle miles traveled task force that would look at instituting something like that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we've covered transportation. One more round in the ring. One more bell to ring. We'll be back in just a minute.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Hills Mall offers more than just shopping. Bring the whole family and enjoy SeaQuest Interactive Aquarium to feed the fish and exotic birds, hold live reptiles, and even swim with the stingrays. Or pump up the action and visit Dartside, Utah's premier soft foam dart tag arena. And don't forget the Great Room Escape, where you can challenge your friends to solving mysteries inside themed rooms. So come and experience great fun at the Layton Hills Mall and visit playindavis.com for other great activities.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our final topic of things to discuss in the legislature that the counties are interested in is going to be the issue of tax reform. Now, obviously, at a national level, we've passed a major tax reform, and for the most part, people are happy with it unless you live in a high property tax state, in which case their people aren't so happy. But Utah's managed itself fairly well, and so this looks like a benefit. How do you translate that down into state-level tax reform?
Well, one of the big issues, and you just alluded to it, is the state and local tax issue. So in the final package, up to $10,000 of state and local taxes can be essentially pulled off of your federal return. So that includes your property taxes, as well as your state income taxes. With our income tax as low as it is by comparison to other states, this will cover most Utahns, which is a good thing. In addition, one of the major benefits of federal tax reform is kudos to Senator Mike Lee, who pushed for an increase in the child tax credit. So there was an increase there, which will obviously allow Utahns who have multiple children to deduct those children at a higher rate. So two big benefits, really tying into the momentum that's been taking place federally. You got to remember, this is the first major tax reform since the Reagan administration. There have been changes, but this is major overhaul really since the 80s. And legislators at the local level are also looking to capitalize on that. So there is an omnibus bill, about 200 pages, that is tackling everything from corporate income tax, personal income tax, sales tax, property tax, all of these issues, and again, trying to capitalize on that momentum and recognize our economy's changed since we've done stuff locally. Using sales tax as the major funder of local government and state government probably isn't the way to go any longer when you look at the ways in which we buy goods these days and what our tax base looks like currently.
So is an internet sales tax, is that going to actually help cover that sales tax gap?
Well, most of the major internet companies, where the Amazons of the world, are now paying sales tax in the state of Utah. So we've captured a good portion of that economy. Certainly still some escape that, and most people aren't filing their user taxes, which they're supposed to. But things are changing, and part of the discussion locally is expanding the tax base to include some services. Right now it's largely held to goods. And if you look at the changing dynamics of the economy, most people aren't buying as many goods as they used to when we put the sales tax in place. Much more are buying services. So looking at ways in which we can include some of those services is a major component. In addition, on the income tax, there's been a lot of discussion on education funding. We in Utah use the income tax to fund education. As we see the population increases, that we are recognizing that there may need to be some changes to the corporate and personal income tax rates are on the table as well.
So, you know, if I remember correctly, Utah's income tax is based on a percentage of your federal tax, is it not?
5% roughly.
So if you have massive tax rate reductions at a federal level, is that going to have a negative impact on Utah's budget?
Could potentially. So that's one of the reasons why they're looking at this, is because they know everything that is done federally will have some tie-in to what's taking place locally as well. So there is going to be some discussion around that. There has been some discussion namely through an initiative process of increasing the rate on the personal income tax to try and allow for more money to flow to both public and higher education as well.
So has there been any discussion about this whole truth in taxation element where you have a fixed budget and regardless of what happens to property values, you're stuck? I mean, it seems like it's 50-50. Some people say that's the only way to fly, and some people are saying, we'll let things float a little bit so that you know, people are feeling like they're paying the same tax rate and counties can put a little rainy day money aside.
Right.
In terms of truth in taxation, I think it's been one of the great savers for Utah. I personally really like the system where you have to be accountable. Go out to the public, tell them what you're doing, tell them where you're spending the money, and if you do it regularly and frequently, I think you can get past the fear that is truth in taxation. The alternative systems that other states have where you can ratchet up based on, you know, the increase in the value of the home, they've had huge backlashes to the property tax, which we have not experienced in Utah. So while many lament truth in taxation, I truly see it as one of our kind of silent saviors to the property tax system that we have, and has really saved us from the revolt that other states have experienced similar to California.
And there are periodic discussions about how that could be changed, how there could be a little bit more leeway given to county governments to modify their rate, to modify that the process of truth in taxation. But I think Lincoln's right. If a body wants to increase the tax rate, wants to increase taxes on the public, that's fine. The process is there, the system is there. It hurts for a while, but the reality is it's an open system. And then if you go through that periodically, it's a better approach than waiting 20 years and then having to do it.
Yeah, it hurts until you get voted out of office because you're the one that had to raise the taxes, even though they had to be raised.
Absolutely, but I think that's true too. That doesn't happen all the time, but certainly people get pretty annoyed when they have to hear the detail. But the more they can understand, the more they can make a decision.
Which leads us to the one big thing that's a part of the omnibus tax bill is changing the ad requirements. Right now there's a requirement by law that you have to put an ad in the newspaper. I'm not criticizing the Deseret News or Salt Lake Tribune. Not many people are taking the newspaper these days. And so maybe modifications to a $30,000 or $40,000 ad that's required by law is something we should look at so that we make sure we're getting effective information out to the public. There's some things in there that need to change. I mean, it's been a long time since we've looked at this stuff, so certainly as the way in which we consume news has changed, maybe we change some of those dynamics as well.
Okay, excellent. We've gone all 4 rounds. We've done very well. Thank you for joining us on the County Seat. Remember, county government is where your life happens. Follow us on social media. Share it with your friends. We'll see you next week on the County Seat.